to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for this Monday, February 5th, 2024. It's 10:03 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. Vice Chair Commissioner Fournier is excused this morning. We have Commissioner Gary Edwards, Commissioner Carolina Mejia, and Commissioner Emily Klaus with us for virtual public attendance. You may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We have a 2-hour work session this morning with 3 agenda items. Item 1 is a follow-up on a public hearing we had. I don't have the date handy, but I'm sure staff does, on the agricultural code update part of CPA 16, a sub-part, a portion of that docket item CPA 16. Informational session, Ashley Arise here from Community Planning. So do we just, I guess, is that okay? I should note for the record, our interim county manager is excused for the meeting. Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder is here. Are we going right to Ashley on this?
We're going right to Ashley, and that hearing was on January 12th, sorry, 16th of 2024. So to Ashley.
Yeah, hi. Ashley Rye, Community Planning Manager, CPED. Really just here to answer follow-up questions. We did provide a briefing form that tried to detail out our answers, but thought I would touch on them briefly here and then just open it up to any additional questions. As Assistant County Manager Gelder mentioned, this is a follow-up from a hearing held on January 16th. And this is just one piece of the overall project that we've been working on with community stakeholders over the last year and a half related to the long-term agriculture zoning and code update. So the questions that came up, the first one was in relation to updating, whether updates related to cannabis and hemp were recommended by the Planning Commission as part of their public process. And so one of the people that came and provided testimony indicated that the Planning Commission had asked for changes to the documents that the board was reviewing that staff didn't make. We did loop back with the Planning Commission. Commissioner Menser actually got an opportunity to be there for that meeting. The Planning Commission did indicate that their intent would have been, if updates were easy, to go ahead and make those changes, but staff let them know that the changes that were being asked for went way beyond the scope of what was before the Planning Commission and what we brought to the board. And a lot of that has to do with the way our current codes are structured for cannabis and hemp. They all fall in one chapter of the code that pretty much supersedes the underlying chapters, underlying zoning chapters. So making a small change to the agritourism overlay or making a small change to the long-term agriculture zone as it relates to cannabis and hemp may not hold unless you actually go in and make changes to that other chapter, the one where all those restrictions lie. So we let the Planning Commission know that at the time that they made a recommendation that the best path forward was recommending to the board that the item get docketed separately. We already have a proposed docket item for making changes to all of the relevant sections for cannabis hemp, and that it would be better addressed in a separate process. I also did some digging on the process that the county went through in adopting those changes in the first place. And it sounds like there were at least 13, if not 14 public hearings held on just those provisions, with hundreds and hundreds of community members participating in those public hearings and via written comment. And since we didn't do a robust outreach effort around those provisions, staff also feels as if it's docketed separately, we'd be able to do that robust outreach effort. But it would not necessarily be transparent to just make those changes at the very end of this process. Any questions or comments, or would you like to share, Commissioner Menser, what you heard from the Planning Commission?
I'll jump in just to kind of try to clarify what I thought I heard. Can you clarify what motion it is they made a motion, right, at the end of that Planning Commission meeting, just to say, here's what we thought we were saying, or here's what we'd like to see the board do in the future. It was kind of but it was trying to clarify what the public comment, but also it wasn't, super prescriptive as to what they were directing. I think something to the effect of, we would like the commissioners to treat cannabis as an agricultural thing or something.
Yeah.
Do you recall that motion?
They recommended that the board consider docketing an item to look at cannabis and hemp, as an agricultural product, like all other agricultural products. And that they felt like that was a worthwhile change, and that a lot of, even though this isn't one of the older, package of provisions, you could say, in the code, that a lot of changes have happened since it was adopted. So it would be worthwhile for the board to look at it moving forward.
And then on that, there was a separate, in my mind, separate issue about the use of the word marijuana versus cannabis. Is that a separate thing that I mean, it's the same person that's making the public comment, but I'm just wondering, was that something that the planning commission had any opinion about, or is that something that we'd have to docket if we wanted to address it, or?
It would be in one full package. So cannabis is referenced and defined in the chapter that specifically regulates marijuana / cannabis related uses. So it's not that it's not referenced, it's just marijuana is definitely the terminology that is used more frequently throughout the code. And if the board chose to docket an item to update that chapter, that would be part of it, updating the definitions, updating the references of the code throughout, making changes to both the regulatory chapter, which is 20.63, as well as those underlying zoning chapters.
So just to kind of boil this down for the board, it sounds like the items that were raised in public comment on that topic are going to be teed up for the board to discuss and consider on our docket discussion in a month or two here. And in terms of how it relates to the decisions that we have to make on this code update, in staff's opinion, it's really not something that we need to worry about in terms of the agricultural code update. Is that fair?
Yes, it would be beyond the scope of the agriculture code update.
So with that summary, I'll ask if the board members have questions about that.
Well, I've got some issues to go over that were brought up by constituents at the hearing.
We're gonna go issue by issue, I think. We're just dealing with the cannabis piece.
Oh, no, I'm all for doing something on the cannabis. I don't know what it is, but I think we need to address it, being the state law has adjusted it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Commissioner Mejia or Klaus, any questions on the cannabis issue?
No, I don't have
Not for
any
me.
questions.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Not for me.
Okay,
Me either.
okay, perfect.
Next
issue.
issue.
And
So,
I just, as a reminder, the next docketing conversation is set for Valentine's Day, I believe, on the 14th.
yes,
And I will not be present, but I will be watching that, because it's informational going through the projects, and I'll be watching that video on that, because I'll be traveling.
And we'll save
To a
chocolates for you.
conference, but yeah, we'll be on top of that, and then there'll be follow-up from there.
Yep, and that is just gonna be a presentation of the different projects, so you don't have to worry about missing any decision points.
Yep.
Because the only request will be opening a comment period.
Okay, what's next?
Yeah, so the next question was one that came from you, Commissioner Edwards, regarding how weddings and or other agritourism-related events are currently regulated, as well as what the proposed changes are. So special events like weddings are currently allowed. They're allowed as a short-term event up to 10 days per year or up to 21 days, subject to a special use permit for a home occupation. They are limited to 3 consecutive days and must have 10 days between events. When we were doing outreach for the agritourism updates, we did research into what those special use permits look like to see if there were any additional conditions placed on those requests beyond what's already in the code, and there weren't. So that's why we proposed to change it to up to 21 days per year without that special use permit. So that is one of the changes, is going from 10 to 21 without having an additional permit required. Still limiting it to 3 consecutive days, and then shortening the time in between events to 7 days. And this was in response to feedback we received from the Agritourism Committee, as well as the Agricultural Advisory Committee, that if it's 10 days in between events, they can't have events, two weekends right next to each other and that their event season is very short. It's really only spring through fall. A lot of these are in outdoor, like tents or, barns or whatnot. So that was a change that was made in response to that feedback, that 7 days would allow them to at least have an event, 2 weekends in a row in their prime event season.
I'm not sure that 7 days allows that.
It'd be like a Friday then Saturday event or a Saturday then Sunday event.
Well, if it was 5 days between events, then they're allowed to do that. But if there's 7 days between events, it's gonna end up being every other weekend.
And if 5 days is okay with the board, that is something that is definitely at your
Well,
will
that, I
to
mean, that was
change.
brought up by folks that are trying to have these events only, they're only practical during the good weather times. And if we restrict people too much, it's not worth the investment if they can only have two events a month, for an example. That's not worth it for them.
What is the 10-day versus 21-day? I didn't quite get that.
Oh, just
10 days a year total?
currently, the way it's written in the code is that a farm is only allowed to have 10 events per year unless they come in for a special use permit, and then they can have 21 events per year. And so when we did research into what do those permits look like, are we requiring anything additional other than just going through a process? And we didn't find that we were requiring anything additional that isn't already codified. So making the change from 10 to 21 just outright permitted without that additional process.
So now it's gonna be 21.
It would be just 21 straight,
21 events or 21 days of events?
21 events per year.
Okay, let me ask commissioners questions on this item. And Commissioner Edwards sounds like he's proposing a potential reduction from 7 to 5.
Well, just so that they're not limited to every other weekend. 7 days in between scratches out a whole nother upcoming weekend.
And it is at the board's will if they want to keep it at the 10 events per year and the current.
Well, no, I'm all for giving them the 21 events. And I'm all for giving them the ability to conduct those events on weekends in the summer months, not every other weekend.
Commissioner Mejia?
So what constitutes events? Like, is it just weddings? Is it like, a festival? Like, what does it constitute under the code?
Yeah, so the code as examples references things like a wine festival, an art festival, a food festival. It does reference weddings specifically. So those are the examples, at least in the code.
Thank you. I'm okay with Commissioner Edwards' suggestion.
Let me ask a
Yeah,
quick
go
one.
ahead.
Does the code require any type of notification by the property owner of their adjoining properties? And I ask because having gone through a deliberative process about events in a past life, one of the reasons for that 7 days or the every other is because of what Commissioner Edwards noted in terms of the good weather and just how close the proximity is of that adjoining property and their ability to be outdoors and enjoy their surroundings. And potentially if they would have that experience, if there's an event every weekend during the summer, then they wouldn't have the opportunity to do family barbecues, et cetera, without the potential impact of noise, et cetera.
Conflict of one
Yeah.
type.
So that's the only reason sometimes for.
I think that's I think it's a reasonable expectation if proximity is an issue. So how can you put that in there and make it work? I think there's a way to do it, but I think it's a valid point.
So the way it's written right now, and this is a carryover of what is currently codified, is that if the event is lasting 2 or more days and has a daily attendance exceeding 200 individuals, the on-site manager or owner shall notify all adjacent neighbors bordering the subject property in writing of the date, time, duration, and description of the event, and notification shall occur at least 5 business days prior to the beginning of the event. And I do want to, I misspoke, I'm really sorry, it's 21 days of events per year and up to 3 days per event. So if you're gonna have
Three-day event, it could be
you
seven.
have a 3-day event, 7, so I apologize.
Commissioner Klaus.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I also agree with Commissioner Edwards' suggestion. But then after hearing Rob's feedback, I do think that that's worth considering. However, I'm kind of leaning more towards what Commissioner Edwards has suggested. And I hope that maybe we could have a further conversation about what that might look like for next door neighbors or people who might be disrupted by events every weekend.
Does, by any chance, I don't know if Commissioner Klaus heard Ashley's explanation of the notification? Because didn't you cover that, Ashley? Basically, isn't it covered?
Yeah, and I think a lot of these events would be booked far enough out that notice is gonna be sent out, hopefully ahead of just 5 days.
Yeah, somebody
versus
can
last minute
plan to
events.
go to the ocean that weekend or whatever,
Well,
if they don't like, wine noise or something, whatever wine bottles make.
I kind of wish Commissioner Fournier was here because I know he is tangled with this directly in his role in Tenino. My only connection to this is folks that were opposed to this because they were upset about the frequent events that were happening at a neighboring property. So I know there is, always two sides to the equation. So I don't have a strong opinion, frankly, about the proposals. So anything else, commissioners, before we move to the next sub-issue?
And what's the next sub-issue?
I don't know. Ashley will tell
Uh,
us.
I mean, I've got quite a few different issues to go over eventually here.
I
Any
just
more
have,
on the wedding or the events piece?
Weddings and events?
No, I've got.
All right, let's go back to Ashley.
yep, so I've got, the next one was a question about whether there's a conflict in definition of agritourism between county code versus state law. The definition that was referenced during public testimony is out of RCW 4.24.830. And, Maya and I took a look at it and it didn't look like there was any conflict. The 4.24.830 reference from RCWs is not necessarily related to land use or growth management. But even having said that, it didn't look like there were any conflicts. I mean, it's not word for word, but since it's not under the Growth Management Act, it wouldn't have to be word for word. And then the last one, this is an easy one. It was hard to see on the map, but the question was whether all long-term agriculturally zoned properties do fall within the agritourism overlay. And the answer is yes. So our charge is to create a better map, so folks know that any property that's zoned long-term ag is actually within the agritourism overlay district.
So the map is not gonna be a continuous boundary. There's gonna be all kinds of little islands around.
There's a few islands, not many, that are north of where the current agritourism overlay district is. And it's easy to find if you go into geodata, if you're going into the county mapping system. It's harder to find if you just want like a paper copy. So we'll make sure to make a nice PDF paper copy that someone can print out. But all the benefits of the agritourism overlay district do currently apply to long-term ag. And if the board would like to extend those beyond the current boundaries, the long-term ag zoning project is probably a good time to take a look at that, rather than the code update, which doesn't really look at any kind of mapping boundaries.
So at the time that if we were to add LTA zoning and there's 2 proposals to do just that, would some of that fall then outside and then we'd have to expand the agricultural overlay?
Yeah, essentially it would get extended, and then I know that at least going through the public process, there were even inquiries as to why it doesn't cover the whole county, or, you know, why don't the farms up in Johnson Point or Steamboat Island benefit from this? So I think it could be a bigger conversation, and, you know, an appropriate time to do
I
that.
think that's
would
what
be-
I heard from constituents, that they're looking for a little more flexibility. And that's what you're saying is, you're gonna do that, or you're working on that? Or
Well, we're gonna
that's
be-
something we could fix later?
I think it's something, we have to come back to you with maps anyway for the long-term ag zoning, and that seems like a really good time to talk about maps.
Okay, so we're not rushing into adopting this at this point in time. We're gonna do more discussion.
No, it's just that the maps are separate.
Maps are separate. This is the code only.
So
Okay,
it's
so-
basically clean the code up, and then when you have an opportunity to change the maps, then all of the new fresh code would also apply to those maps.
So we can overcome the restrictions placed on places that could do something now, but maybe they're not. No, they're limited from doing something right now. But if the map shows that they're in an area, then they can, or how does that work? My concern is that we might be picking winners and losers by saying you can, but you can't, even though if the situation is identical.
Yeah, so we didn't propose any changes to the map as part of this process. But that is still within your purview
So
with the long-term agriculture
Who gets to
zone.
make adjustments to the map later on?
You,
And does that take a year process?
no, because we haven't had a public hearing on the long-term agriculture zone, and so we could include that in the public hearing.
Just as a reminder, back in the fall, similar to Grand Mound, et cetera, the decision was made to kind of bifurcate the two. Move the code only forward so that we could try to make that more efficient and separate the maps, because we did not have the staff available to actually generate the maps for a good conversation. So this is definitely, we'll have to schedule a time to do a hearing specifically on the LTA.
And so all the new event language that you were talking about, you can pass the code at your next board meeting, and folks that are in the agritourism overlay district today could host more events this coming summer. If you wait
I see.
for the maps, then it's probably gonna be this
Okay.
summer.
Okay, good, good.
Okay.
That's it, that's all I had, and I'm just
Commissioner
happy
Edwards,
to
what else do you
answer
have on your
questions.
list?
Oh, I got quite a few. How about on the height of farm structures? 35 feet limits the ability to have a real hay barn or a silo. And why did you pick 35 feet? And why did you pick that over
I-
40 or 45 feet? or whatever?
Didn't, it was just something that wasn't changed. There are specific exemptions for agriculture structures. They live in a different part of the code though, rather than in the long-term agriculture zone. You can go to another section of the code. It's really fun to try to find sections of the code that apply, that specifically have exemptions for certain agricultural structures.
But under this agricultural coverage, you might say, it says maximum building height 35 feet.
Yep, and then
So-
there's another section of the code that specifically talks about exemptions to
But
building height.
do we want to have conflicting codes? I mean,
It's
why
not-
say something like
It's
that?
not conflicting, it's additive.
Yeah,
So,
it's just regulated in a different place in code.
because it applies to all. So imagine, so LTA talks about just, the height limit for just LTA, but you might have a barn in rural resource residential or rural resource industrial. And so the exemption is intended to apply to height provisions, no matter what the underlying zone is. That's why it's in a separate place.
I
But it's
know,
additive.
why do you have it at 35 feet? That's my question, because you can't, theoretically, somebody's going to think they can't do more than 35 feet when they're planning. They're not going to go searching through the code to see if they can find an exemption to a legislative restriction that's in place. Most people aren't. I mean, I want people to be able to do this themselves so they don't have to go hire a professional.
We could make a reference to the other section so that there's at least a little roadmap for
I mean,
someone who wants
that's,
to look it up
I guess
themselves.
that's okay to a degree, but why does it even have to say 35? Why wouldn't you refer to whatever that section of code is that you're referring to look up? Why wouldn't you just say 45 feet or,
Well, it actually says height limitations of this title shall not apply to barns, silos, residential chimneys, spires, gables, domes, flagpoles, clock towers, flues, monuments, radio towers, television antenna or aerials, transmission towers, smokestacks, or other similar structures and mechanical appurtenances. So it applies to that no matter what zone you're in. So we could point or have a reference to that code section. That's an easy change, just so someone knows that there might be
Okay,
more
well,
provisions.
that's what so why do we even say the height restriction, maximum building height 35 feet? I'm looking through this, I'm gonna decide if I'm gonna put a silo up, for farm use.
So the
can't-
silo would be exempt, but the 35 feet would apply to a house.
Yeah,
But the
Right.
chimney on the house would be exempt.
okay.
I mean, it's
I just don't see why government has to put conflicting things in places. But if you refer to it,
we can, I think a reference is
to-
a nice way
to
to,
correct that, so they know they have an option, well, I guess then
Yeah.
my concern is mute.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to sort of put that reference and actually help kind of
guide.
guide the potential applicant.
Okay.
But it does raise a great question, or is a bigger look at how code is structured overall, and are there ways that we can simplify it and make it such that folks don't have to look in multiple locations? But that's a bigger project.
Okay.
Potentially be docketed sometime.
It's just always a tension and how, it depends on how complex the code is and how many different sub areas there are. I mean, you just go through this in every context where it's like, if you put it in its separate section, then it's easy to see it all, but then you get this quote unquote conflict because something else reads like it's not there. If you try to interlineate it across every single section where it applies, then you invariably have errors and omissions, and then you actually create true conflicts of law that then can be litigated. So you're increasing your risk profile, and depending on how complex and how many different, places it has to be modified in order to truly interweave it, when something's been added later. I mean, I've just gone through this, and it's kind of a case-by-case determination, depending on how, if the code's not too big and cumbersome, then it's better to just pretend like it was there from the beginning and interweave it. But if it's too unwieldy, if you're adding something on to something that's been around a long time, it's almost better to have it in a separate place, and then you don't see it, and that's kind of what looks like what's happened here, and then you don't see it where you might expect to see it. But there's always a tension to go the other way. It's never a perfect,
No, nothing's ever perfect.
never a perfect answer there.
How about attachment C? Where you have conflicts with other, means we're talking about conflicts with other regulations. There's things like rural theme. Who determines a rural theme? Can I have a green barn instead of a red barn? What's the breakdown there? I mean, and when we put things in like that, what is it, a discretionary call on the staff person, on the individual applicant? It leaves things in question for those kind of broad statements.
I would have to do research into the legislative intent. That is not a term that we put in. This police staff isn't
So
necessarily
why even
proposing
put it in there, I guess?
It's a carryover from what's currently
Yeah, but I
in the
mean,
code.
But in
But
the
you don't
process of
have to.
fixing it, we can take it out,
You
can't
can
we?
take rural, if you.
I mean,
if
but
the
I suppose you
board-
have to think about that for all the reasons Commissioner Menzer pointed out.
What does that apply to? I'm not, the rural
Well, I
theme?
mean, rural theme, what does that mean?
But I understand your question, but what does it apply, where is it in the code? Where does it come into play?
Okay, just a second.
Like, I can't build something in the rural area if it doesn't have a rural theme.
Yeah, here, it's under attachment C, so it's the first part, general, AOD standards. And I guess that means,
Okay, for agriculture overlay.
I'm trying to place it myself. Why is it in there? Because who says, is a wagon wheel mounted on your fence coming in? Is that a rural theme? But I don't know. But a chicken's not. I don't know. I don't like chickens, so chickens don't qualify. You know, a cutout of a chicken. I'm just using that as a stupid example. Everybody's got their thing. And what does define a rural theme? The color? Does it need to be beige? Whatever. I mean, there's just issues worth thinking. I'm trying to do away with conflicts. That's kind of where I'm coming from. And specifically, on number 3 under there, compliance with other standards, under the AOD, usage shall comply with all other applicable county regulations, including but not limited to health, land use, environmental, building, construction, public works requirements and standards, as well as any applicable state and federal requirement. I mean, it just seems like it's so burdensome to try and figure all that out. That what's the rule there? A staff person picks the rule? What about this? I don't know. I'm just curious. How does that work? And just, I mean, is it needed?
I think the intention there is to let folks know that other codes do still apply. So even if you read here that you can go ahead and set up a business, letting them know if they want to read through it themselves, that even if this section of code says that that business is fine, you're going to also need to make sure that you're meeting the building code requirements, environmental health requirements. So it's
That's a lawyer's
Your little
job
roadmap.
security, Commissioner.
Geez, I guess. It all depends, right, Counselor? Well, but we're talking about simplifying regulatory oversight. That's what I'm doing. I'm all about trying to keep it as simple as possible. And I don't think, you could put in there other regulatory oversight may apply. And then not make it so darn complicated that they gotta, okay, everybody's aware, you just don't get to dig a hole and that's your septic dump for that weekend. Okay, we know that, so
no,
why
but
do we have to point everything out? I mean, because you can't point it all out. You list some of it, but you'll never be able to point it out. So why not just say there could be other regulatory, there could be other pieces of regulatory oversight, i.e., you better have a septic system or whatever. I don't know. I'm just trying to grasp at straws to make it simple. So is that making sense to?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you there. I haven't taken the time to look through this whole thing. It looks like you've
Oh,
gone through
yes.
it.
You gotta
But, I
dig
mean-
everything when you're looking over regulatory stuff. I try to put myself in somebody else's shoes when they're doing it. But a lot of this came from like our hearing, maybe not this particular one at the hearing. A lot of people don't like to come up and talk in front of the microphone, but they'll come to me and say, hey, well, what about this? And I'm kind of the sounding board for those citizens. So all I'm saying is, why?
so removing the reference won't necessarily remove any other regulatory
Right, it
requirements.
would not.
And
We
so
all
it's
know
up-
we have to have a septic system.
It's up to the board if they would
I
like
want
to
to make
just-
it as simple as possible, and hopefully common sense would apply a little bit, They know they have to have a septic, just referring to one issue, septic system.
I
You
think
can't have
it's,
200 people with no septic ability.
it's, but when can they have, let's say, a portable restroom facility versus a permanent one? When do they have to have hand washing? When do they not have to have hand washing? When does the,
Do you
whatever
have that in
structure-
here?
It would, so those all are those environmental health regulations that this is referring to.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's-
you may have to do that, but that's part of that. You may need other
Mm-hmm.
regulatory oversight, which is okay. I don't know, just, how can, we're gonna miss something. Okay, it's not in here, so does that mean it doesn't apply? Where if we say there may be other regulatory oversight,
If the board wants to simplify the language,
that's all
we
I'm
can
shooting
simplify
for.
the language.
Keep
It won't change
Keep
what,
it,
what
and there's
applies.
other things in here like tree houses and stuff like that. I mean, you make reference to tree houses, are tree houses part of our code and stuff?
Well, the building department would offer any
Well, yeah,
information
but I mean, if
regarding
you
whether they're regulated or
specifically,
not.
if you specifically call out tree houses, does that mean you're advocating for and everything's okay? Cause you do, there's tree houses in here.
Yep, and that was actually feedback from the Agriculture Advisory Committee. They're
And I'm
very
not against
popular-
tree houses, I'm
Very
just saying.
popular up in the central Puget Sound region. And so they wanted to see it at least as an option, but they would still have to comply with whatever building code.
Is there code for tree
requirements.
houses?
There, if it's it would be an elevated structure
And there is code
over
for
a
it?
certain size.
There is code for it?
There's
though?
code for elevated structures
So
over a
the
certain
kids'
size.
playhouses falls into
Well,
that?
It is, this lays the framework for uses, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone doesn't have to get a building permit to establish that use in a structure that is safe, that meets life safety code requirements.
Okay, let me just go on a little bit. Exempt AOD uses. We talk about maybe a retail outlet out at your property by the road. I guess that's what it's referring to. And under these rules, it talks about 200 square feet or less of floor area. But the code allows you to have 400 square feet. So there again is a conflict. I mean, what's the difference? How come we would restrict to 2 if the code says 4?
If you'd like it to be 4 to align with the building code, there are other building code provisions that end up applying depending on the size. And if you're having someone work there or not work there. But if you want it to align with the 400, it can align with the 400.
I'm just saying, if it was an excess of 400, then you've got to go through a bunch of other stuff. Even if it's under 400, you might have to do certain things as well. I don't know how it's just conflicting to our existing code of 400. You know, it's kind of, it was probably there from some time back when it used to be 200. Now it's 400. So I'm just pointing.
It's probably in this case less an issue of the square footage, is more of the use. Is the public going to be entering that space? It will have different design standards. Is it going to have a commercial kitchen? Is it,
Yeah, 400 square feet is only for a building that is not being occupied,
Yeah, but
is
they're gonna
the
have,
exemption.
they're gonna keep the pumpkins in there to keep them dry when you load them on in your car or something. I don't know. I just wondered about it. I think all of these are worth discussing, but I do want to get this thing going so that we can have people utilize it as well, just like you said. What is a temporary structure, like, under agricultural homestays where no permanent structures are involved? Does that mean like a tent? Are you allowed to, that's a non-permanent structure? Is that what it is?
Yeah, right now agricultural homestays actually require a permanent structure, which if you think about wanting to preserve agricultural land for future agricultural use, you know, you speak of conflict, it seems sort of conflicting that you would require permanent buildings to be placed to allow people to stay in them and allow up to 6 of these permanent buildings. And so more flexibility that it doesn't have to be a permanent building and would actually have less conflict with protecting that soil for future agricultural use that might not be a homestay. So tents is a common one, yurts, things that, you know, maybe even an RV. They're still subject to all the other restrictions though, in terms of how long an individual group of individuals can stay, what's the maximum number of individuals and things like that. It's just the type of structure or lack thereof. required.
Commissioner Mejia's hand was up. Then down.
No, I was gonna ask about temporary structures and kind of what that meant specifically, since it's not really defined, but
Covered it.
they got asked.
Okay.
Again, under permitted uses and siting standards, under permitted uses, that's at the bottom of this page.
Page 18.
2008G.040, permitted uses and
It's
siting.
under 18 right there.
Yeah, I'm looking under C, and it just refers to rural theme again, that's all. And that, I hate to have that whole business of who makes that choice. And I just wonder why it's in there, that's all.
I could do research to see if there's anything in the record, but it wasn't a term that staff introduced. We kept it from.
And
the
then I'm
original.
getting towards the end here on permitted uses, specific siting standards. And that is where, under D, country inns. You see that there? Country inns shall be accessed from a paved road located a minimum of 1/2 mile from a county arterial or collector and spaced a minimum of 1 air mile from another country inn or neighborhood convenience use. I mean,
All right, that one seems a little bit.
What's that?
So that one seems a little bit
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
oversubscribed.
I mean, I can see some merit probably, but do we really need to have that? We could be limiting somebody's ability to do something. If they want to drive on a gravel road, let them drive on the gravel road. I don't know that, it's not the government's call to.
Believe it or not, there used to be A through L for special provisions for country inns. And so this is a version that is
Shorter.
a lot smaller than what it was.
But still,
It
it's,
is, that is up to the board's will. So we did not, like, our approach to the agritourism overlay district wasn't to do sort of a wholesale, let's open it all up. It was really trying to clean it up. So not changing too much of what is already allowed or required, but just cleaning it up because that A through L for country inns that exists, all those subsections, some of those even seem to conflict with one another. So we were just like, let's make it simpler. If you want to do a country inn, here's what you need to do rather than a whole page of subsection provisions and standards. So
well, how about just country inns less than 8,000 square feet in size located a minimum of 100 feet from all the property lines so they don't affect the neighbors when they're talking out on the deck having coffee or something.
that is
I
up
don't
to
know,
the
just-
board.
So
It just seems too much.
potentially striking the remainder of that.
Yeah,
paragraph.
I mean, that's all I'm suggesting, that somebody was concerned enough about it to bring it to my attention as well. Agricultural homestays, you know, I don't know, totaling no more than 2,400 square feet for the entire project site. I don't know, 2,400 square feet,
It
what,
was 400 square feet per homestay.
20, yeah, this says 2,400 square feet.
Is this like putting bungalows out or something? And
I guess. I did not write this one either. This is a carryover. We tried to simplify it because it wasn't clear.
So basically, if I would read this, you can have a structure or temporary structure, et cetera, for agricultural homestay up to 600 square feet, totaling no more than 2,400.
So you could either have four,
You could have four
600s.
of these 600 square foot structures for that agricultural homestay.
Or you could have 6 400 square foot structures.
You know, I see us we have a lot of restrictions on doing certain things. I mean, that's just government, you know. We're now putting together homeless shelters. We're trying to keep people in off the street. None of those abide by any of the regulations that we have, basically. And if we're trying to do something even here, is this too restrictive? I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know the answer to that. A 400 square foot building, for an example, it could be a heck of a bungalow, you know, I mean, you're saying 600, I think,
Up to,
up to 600.
which is,
So leaving some leeway, I suppose, as to how they can get there. I don't know, just, it's undefined, you know, really.
so is it the overall total?
I don't know I don't know exactly, but sometimes when you have the wording that's prior to it and then agricultural homestays, what is that? Is it a bed and breakfast? Is it a,
No,
heads and beds? Does it fall under our, I don't know.
Lodging
For me,
tax and-
for me, this is like, the really big policy issues, the board can usually figure them out. I mean, we have to figure them out. It's this kind of detail where I think the planning commission's really, really useful, because they can spend the time and hear the public and go through these kind of details and figure out things. You know, they're not huge policy issues, they're just trying to make things better and more efficient. So if we were to, you know, it sounds like we're gonna have, depending on what we do with the ag zoning, we're gonna have AOD issues to clean up. We could maybe fold some of these details into that effort and have it go through planning
Yeah,
commission.
let them look at it.
Cause I mean,
I'm not trying to
me trying
write
to
it
figure
right
out this
now.
on the fly, yeah, I mean, I see where Commissioner Edwards is going with some of these, but.
and if the board's directive is to really open it up, we didn't have the space or resources doing this alongside the zoning. Like, we asked for feedback from all of our stakeholder work groups and then made changes really in response to where we received feedback. But if you really want it to be let's sit down and look at the agritourism overlay district, there's a lot of work being done in other counties. We could do that. It would just be a lot more staff resources than just let's clean it up and then do some sort of minor tweaks.
Well, these are kind of minor tweaks, I think, that I'm talking
So
about.
what you've referenced is all very easy changes that could be made and brought back
Yeah, that's
for a
all. I think if you
decision. But that's up to you.
give us an opportunity to look at it once you make the change and so we can comment on them. And that way, I know we've had a hearing, but those citizens that are concerned, give them an opportunity to look at it. I like to have this citizen input. I think it makes it kind of squeezes out the stuff that isn't quite so necessary, I guess.
So do you, any other, I was gonna.
Okay,
say
just
in terms
one,
of
I think I have
process.
one other quick one here maybe. Under attachment A, again, on the second page there, under C, on-site construction and maintenance of equipment facilities used for. What about manufacturing or something?
Hold on.
Is there anything, what is manufacturing, what that word?
I want to catch up to you.
Page 6 of 26.
Page 6 of 26. Okay, sorry. Which one? Which definition?
Down at the
Sorry.
bottom of the page, just,
Agriculture?
yeah, on, on-site construction.
Subsection C.
3C.
Okay.
Is that like manufacturing as well? I mean, you're making widgets or something? I don't know, okay?
Well, it's related to agriculture, so.
As long as it's related to agriculture, right? That's the key?
Yeah, that would be the,
Equipment used used for the activities in the definition.
Yeah.
So it'd be building your barn.
and this provision here is really to try to make it consistent with the voluntary stewardship program and the definition that the state has for agricultural activities.
Okay, I think how about on the next page, page 7 of 26, on that overlay? And we've kind of already talked about this, why it can't be, I mean, why can't everything be included, but we're gonna address that.
Through the
Sounds
mapping
like with the
process,
map
yes.
as it comes up. And then down on the bottom of the page, country inn means a restaurant or temporary overnight accommodations. I mean, that's, does that do it? I mean, covers most everything. We scratched out all the it looks like you scratched out quite a bit there, right? To be located in R120.
Yes.
Okay,
They're already listed there, so you didn't need the duplication.
okay, good enough. I think,
So it sounds like some Commissioner Edwards' points were sort of additive points. Was there any versus some objection to the code changes proposed?
and just one other thing, on the farm stands, they're allowed to have, we've made the code so it could be a 400 square foot, but this thing still refers to 200 square feet. And farm stands and nurseries, and, you know, want to sell flowers out front, whatever it is. This is, and that's on page 11 of 26.
So from a process standpoint, is it possible to take the feedback and kind of pull out those pieces and then do a crosswalk with potential changes to address?
I can do that. And then would you like a follow-up briefing then scheduled to review that?
I think it'd be good to have, but have something to look at before we have the follow-up briefing, you know, just have scratched this or added this, so we don't have to spend 2 or 3 evenings reading.
I will make it easy to digest.
Succinct.
Commissioner Mejia?
Going back to the event, you know, this 5 days over the 7 days, do we have to give like an official thumbs up for that change, or how would staff like that direction?
Are we trying to get on to some other activity, I guess, here? Is that right? Is that where are we trying to get done with this? I still have a couple of more issues that, and I hate to hog the time, but
Yep. There is another agenda item this morning, but I know.
we got 5 minutes yet for this one, right? Is that okay, Chair, if I try to squeeze this?
Let's get it done.
In getting back to Commissioner Mejia's point, I think we can do a crosswalk. So that you don't necessarily need to do the thumbs up at this point in time, but we'll
Yeah.
kind of refine it a little bit more and bring it back.
Yeah. So, I don't know, 400 versus 200, that's on 11 of 26. When we talk on 12 of 26, down on 7 there, when we talk about stockyard, we're gonna wanna have we're talking about eventually having a slaughterhouse. I guess that's not the term we're supposed to use. We're supposed to use meat processing plant or something. I mean, is that something we could have so we could have it covered if we do get the funding, that we don't have to make a change?
So that's in the city of Tenino, the proposed one right now, but the intention in writing this was that the livestock production study had been completed, and making sure that this code would allow for expansion of livestock processing facilities or production facilities
So is that
in the
gonna be,
appropriate zones.
is it gonna be limited to just one location, that being the Tenino location?
No, not necessarily.
I'm just trying to think of the farm just connecting to that location. Say it didn't work out and they wanted
Yeah.
to put together a processing.
So in our current zones here in the county, a livestock processing facility would only be allowed, I think, in one of the industrial zones in one of our UGAs that we joint plan for. This would allow them to, you know, with conditions, allow them to operate in long-term ag, which seems like an appropriate zone.
Okay,
They're clearly defined on page 9.
Yeah, we did add definitions for it,
Okay.
because there were no definitions anywhere in the code.
Slaughterhouse is in the,
Yep.
is it?
fair game. It's in
Mobiles
It's in
and,
the term in the code.
and mobiles.
I know, but I'm trying to be politically correct at the same time. I
Mobile
got scolded
slaughter
one time
unit
for saying
is
that.
in there too, so those are new definitions that have not been in the code.
On page 13, and this comes under the whole, it's used to be referred to as a family member unit, but now we're talking about ADUs. And here it still talks about tearing down something when a family member dies. You couldn't do something else with it. Is there any thought to having the ability maybe to have a sunsetting clause or something. If grandma's lived here now for 5 years and we're gonna sell the house and move out, well, under this, they gotta tear down that whole thing, abandon the sewer system. You know, it just seems counterproductive to what we're trying to do in today's society of create, some affordable housing.
It's on the list to look at with the housing update, along with a lot of other things. And so rather than just going in and doing one little thing here, wanting to take a wholesale look at it, but that particular issue is definitely on the list.
So is it safe to say that this whole section under 2008A030 family member unit, is that whole thing gonna be reviewed at that
It's
time?
definitely gonna be
So
reviewed.
any of my concerns here, we're gonna address those.
Yep,
And see
that'll
if we
come.
can get them more in line with what's going on.
Family member units, just for everyone's memory, they're almost an artifact at this point, because before we adopted our ADU policy, that was the only way you could do a quasi ADU. But then we updated and created a pathway for ADUs under certain restrictions. So I don't know that anyone's gonna take advantage of this family member unit provision, but I'm sure there's still we didn't get rid of it when we added it, we just added something better. So it's probably not used very much.
No, I don't know if there are any current ones out there, but that's definitely part of the housing update. And there's legislation still being proposed to update ADUs again. So we'll be ready.
In
to
terms
look
of
through
that
all
housing review, just to.
I think that covered-
expectation timeline,
yeah,
that's part of the
Chair.
comp plan
Yeah,
update.
that's comp plan update.
Sorry for being
No, that was-
long-winded, but.
That's some good stuff.
No, I appreciate that.
I'm just curious about the process, is there a way, I didn't quite understand what was being proposed. Like, are we gonna pass the code update and then deal with Commissioner Edwards' points kind of in a separate, or are we gonna try to
I was gonna,
fix them in?
I was gonna bring some proposed language, so I was gonna make a little table that sort of like, here's what it is. Based on the conversation today, here's a proposal, and you could go through them and like thumbs up or thumbs down
Okay,
on
well,
whether,
Can we get that ahead of time before the briefing though?
Sure. Because, yeah, I honestly, I don't always say this, but like Commissioner Fournier, I would really want to hear, he's governed
Yeah, he's had some issues.
so I would really want to hear his 2 cents
Sure.
on some of these.
and so that would be a follow-up briefing. And so we could go through those item by item, sort of like you did with the SMP, where it's like, okay, let's go through these items. Thumbs up, thumbs down. If it's okay, I would like to keep this on a fast timeline, knowing that we are approaching
We've got the season
agritourism
coming.
event season. And there is a lot of excitement. I was just at the agritourism committees. They were doing retreat last week, and they're really excited about some of the changes here and also just getting a lot of those provisions clarified for ongoing compliance cases and things like that. So,
Okay.
So from a process standpoint, we'd be looking to bring this back to one of the board's Monday afternoon meetings, because that's where decisions or pending decisions would be that could
Okay, that's
provide
fine.
that crosswalk of thumbs up, thumbs down.
does that sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
That
Thank you
has a
very
question.
much.
Yeah, Matt, what do you?
If we're going to do a Monday, can we work together to make sure that Commissioner Fournier will be here before it gets here?
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mejia, anything before we close on this topic?
Nope.
All right, then let's close on that topic.
Could I ask
Yeah.
one question, and it's gonna be kind
Go ahead, sir.
of what was just brought up? Are we completely locked in that we can't have, we're not intending to have meetings on Thursday and Friday, but say an issue like this, okay, we're almost to the end of the run. Are we gonna have exemptions that, and especially we got now a bit of a health treatment type thing going on that's might be getting in the way, are we available, as long as we can make it work on our schedules to have some meetings? I just don't know how we can get everything done. I'm questioning how we're gonna be able to get everything done, and that gives us a little bit of leeway if we do that once in a while.
You could certainly choose to have a meeting as a
Okay.
board on Thursdays or
Are we-
Fridays, but what
Are we
we had
limiting our,
heard,
our meeting ordinance and all that kind of stuff? Are we running
we
into
have not
conflict?
changed the meeting ordinance. You
Okay.
could still have regular meetings, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday.
Okay,
But we, were responding to the board's, concern that, all your meeting time was scheduled in county meetings and you had no time available for
no, no, I realize that. I think I'm at odds with about, 3 of my committee assignments that meet on Wednesdays, I think,
And
so.
we tried to.
I know you're trying to work
ensure
around that, but-
We did, indeed, even take those into consideration.
Okay.
So, but like this month so far, lots of open time.
Well, just considering one of our seniors.
Sure, and I think that was the other part of it as well, was to say with 5, it would be impossible really to schedule around all 5
Right.
calendars, and we have other ways of staying up to speed.
Mondays should be flexible for those things, and we have the afternoon and the, okay. All right, let's go to the next piece.
Thank you, this
Thank
was a
you,
really
Ashley.
constructive conversation.
Good job, Ashley. I don't know, you had your hands full.
Rebecca, come on up. Item 2 on the agenda is interlocal agreement for 2024 Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative Regional Initiatives.
Good morning, everyone. I do have slides, if we can put those up.
Those are in the packet as well.
I'm just looking, I don't know who does that. There we go, thanks.
I'm gonna let you drive.
Okay. I have a lot of slides. I'm not gonna go in detail through all of them, because I realize we don't have a whole lot of time, but they're included in your packet for your information. So today's briefing is on the next interlocal agreement with the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative. This one is to implement the 2 regional initiatives that have been selected by the collaborative for 2024. In September, the board signed a long-term interlocal agreement, I'm gonna say ILA for the acronym, that is intended to go through 2030, which sets out a framework for ongoing regional collaboration with the cities of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater to implement our shared Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And since then, I have given a couple updates to the board on some of the initial steps in developing our initiative, specifically the residential energy outreach campaign. So today, I'm presenting the full interlocal agreement before bringing it to the board for approval. The,
A scroll.
I always forget, there we go. Okay, so the process for selecting a regional initiative, just as a reminder, under the TCMC, the collaborative, most of the work is getting done at the jurisdictional level on an ongoing basis. But the collaborative has decided to jointly implement 1 or 2 regional initiatives each year, and we define this 5-step process for selecting what we're gonna focus on as a region. And we're currently on step 4 here, which is after the collaborative selected the initiatives, staff team developed the project plans, which are included in your packet as exhibits A and B, and the budget as exhibit C, and we are bringing it back now to the jurisdictions to determine whether to allocate staff time and resources in the interlocal agreement. I wanna go to that. There we go. Okay, so the selected regional initiatives for 2024 are a residential energy efficiency and electrification campaign and a home energy score model ordinance. These both address residential energy use, which is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Thurston County, and they both directly align with TCMP strategies B1 to reduce energy use in existing residential buildings and B6 to convert to cleaner fuel sources. And both were determined to be substantially improved by regional collaboration. Purpose of the interlocal agreement is to implement these 2 regionally coordinated initiatives, which will advance implementation of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan and support residential energy efficiency and electrification upgrades throughout Thurston County. And again, the project plans for each initiative are included in exhibits A and B. The ILA also establishes roles for the TCMC staff team, the project manager, co-manager, jurisdiction parties and contractors, and it also specifies that the city of Olympia has stepped forward to serve as the contract manager and conduct all contracting responsibilities with one or more selected contractors. Each party shall contribute an equal share of funds sufficient to execute the tasks that are listed in Exhibit C, and I'll show you that in a couple minutes. This equal share may not exceed $14,875 per party. And as our prior ILAs, there is an expectation of in-kind commitment through staff resources, of course, myself participating on the staff team, and possibly support from other jurisdictional staff that's as needed to support the implementation. I'll pause if there's any high-level questions on the interlocal agreement. I have overviews of each of the initiatives that I'd like to briefly go through. Are we 9 minutes in? I want to leave time for questions, but are
You
there
have-
any questions?
We're here till noon, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
And Commissioner items is on the agenda too, but we also have time for that this afternoon. So if you think you need to be done at 11:30, you have a little more time than that.
Okay.
I wasn't sure what you thought there.
I'll still go
Questions at
through
this
them.
juncture for Rebecca? Okay, we're good to go.
Hear about the initiatives. Okay. All right, so I will briefly still review the plans for each. First is the energy efficiency and electrification campaign. It's a bit of a mouthful, so we might call it the Triple E campaign or the E3 campaign. You've seen a little bit about this. I've been presenting the Switches On campaign was the first step, and I'll share about that. But I want to be clear that this is, what we're presenting for 2024 is for the design and planning phase. We're calling it Phase 1. We are able to accelerate certain components of this campaign, but the overall complete launch of a local incentive and outreach campaign is intended to happen in early 2025. So a little background, again, this initiative was selected not only because it addresses the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, also because it's timely, because it will help our residents take advantage of the forthcoming state and federal rebates that are coming through the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, already available at the federal level in the form of tax rebates, but many homeowners may not be aware that they exist. They may also not be aware of electric technologies and their benefits for the climate and for health, and how to, and even if they do know that, there's still barriers. So the intention of this campaign is to overcome some of these barriers of information and costs, and specific technical support to help people make these changes in their homes. We've identified several goals of the campaign listed here. At the highest level, it's really to accelerate residential building electrification and energy efficiency to help meet our climate mitigation goals, and to support energy equity by prioritizing the benefits to low and moderate income residents and overburdened communities. The campaign will consist of 3 components. These are a web-based information hub, an advisory support service, and a local incentive and outreach campaign. And so you'll see that there's different launch dates listed here. The web-based information hub has actually already soft launched, and I'll show you that on the next slide, but that is the Switches On campaign. The advisory support service is adding on to that, and is intended to launch in April. And then the full additional supplemental incentives that we propose to provide to our residents, which will take more building out, will launch later at the beginning of January. So let's go through each of those briefly. The information hub is online. It's wa.switcheson.org, and it is still in a soft launch phase. We are working with the provider to tweak the information based on our needs. And it's officially kicking off on February 15th, and I think all the commissioners should have received an invite to the kickoff event for community leaders, so hope some of you can attend that. And again, this site has information about electric appliances, heat pumps, water heaters, cooking appliances. We're looking to add EV chargers to it. I hope they're able to do that as well, because that all goes under the umbrella of electrification. It also has tools based on zip code where you can identify all the incentives that are applicable for you based on where you live. And they're building out a contractor tool too. So it's, will be vetted, pre-vetted and reviewed contractors that will be included here. Commissioner Edwards.
I guess before you get too far down and I get past topic, are you also going to be, I guess I'll use myself as an example. I get asked quite a bit, what's going on this gas versus electric issue and the electrification program just in general? And how is it being addressed from the grid standpoint? Where are we as far as we're gonna make changes? I mean, that's the goal. What changes are coming to the grid to accommodate the changes? And if everybody made the changes that you're asking for, or 10% do, or whatever, what capacity do we have to make this functional more than just the rhetoric of we'd like to do this, but the reality of being able to do this without brownouts or without the government maintaining control of your thermostat or shutting off your clothes dryer on certain hours or whatever. I think there needs to be a balance as we move forward with the availability of real possibilities of accomplishing this. And our grid today, I'm told, is not capable, and especially when we start all the EV charging stations that we're gonna put in, and then are they gonna have limits on them somehow? So, well, when there's a brownout, that's the first thing shut off is the EV charging station. Or is it the thermostat to your house? Or are we gonna have small nuclear generators put here and there by Puget Power to make up the difference? Where are we at on any of these issues that are common sense issues that is an elected official, I'm hearing from my constituents that wanna know? Got this push going on, because just a few years ago, we were talking about, hey, we need to convert things to buses to natural gas, for an example, from diesel or whatever. So we're rolling along here, going pretty fast. What's coming in reality to address an overload?
So you raised this question the last time we had this conversation. And I talked to Christine Rampa of Puget Sound Energy. She is our contact there, and we are setting up a time for her to come in and chat with the board. She said that that's the question that everybody is asking, and they don't have a plan yet to meet the target goal, and she would love to have that conversation.
So there's no plan in place, but we're still moving
I wouldn't say
forward,
that there's
try and
no
get-
plan in place, and I'm gonna leave that for her to fill in the blanks because
Okay, I
we
mean, I guess
certainly
I'll
can't,
ask
but,
our representative that does happen to be here.
Well,
right
I
now.
can just say,
Is there
Commissioner, that
kinda
we are,
something
we
coming?
are collaborating with Puget Sound Energy. They know that the Switches On campaign is being launched. They're at the table, that, you know, they'll be at the, if you come to the networking event, you can speak to them. Hopefully, they'll be there. I can check if they will. They're very aware of this, and it's beyond our authority here at the county. I see that, you know, we're doing our part with the education. We can provide incentives, but we don't control the grid. The
But
best we
when
can do
it
is.
comes to us making a decision as elected individuals representing our community, it would be maybe irresponsible for for us to say, well, yeah, go over to the fairgrounds and put in 25 charging units and do this over here. You know, without having the ability to say, and we've got it covered,
Well,
folks.
we're constantly in contact with PSC. Anytime, the grants that we're getting for EV chargers, they approve those before we put in the application. So they look at every single site, and
But still, we
assess it
don't have
before-
anywhere near the infrastructure to do the job, so
Let's,
If-
that's what I
if
wanna talk about.
We do for where we're at right now, and it's the future. Do we have the infrastructure we need to meet the ultimate goals that are in future years? We don't have that right now, but that's exactly what Christine will be
But we do have,
to chat with you
but it
about.
sounds like we don't have a plan even yet. So to sell something to the public, I really think we at least have to have a plan. We've got a plan to move our end of the project forward, say. But there seems to be no plan in place. And now the plan certainly can't be, well, we're gonna take down the Columbia River Dam or whatever it is to create less power without having an option to increase power. So I'm just trying to be a realist here. So how can we sell something to the public if we don't have that plan to offset that?
On the plan, so, I mean, there's always people with good ideas. It's usually about having the money to do it. And I know that between the Climate Commitment Act resources that are coming in and the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, we have unprecedented new federal and state level investment money. Now, what they're gonna do with that to increase the grid, that's,
We don't have.
I don't know that.
I'd
We're
like
putting
to.
solar at the Wark, we're
Yeah,
doing our
we're
little things that
doing
we
our
can do.
part.
And I'm sure that there's people that know how to take that money and increase electric capacity. I don't have that answer. I'd like to hear from PSC concerning if they are
When is
saying
that
that they don't
coming
have a
up?
plan.
I
Sounds like
will
maybe.
need to look on the calendar to see when it's been scheduled,
I
but
mean,
it
for
should be
me,
coming up soon.
Without having that in conjunction with this presentation, I just can't walk out of here and be a champion for doing something without having the ability to say, but this is gonna offset this. This is the plan to offset
Okay,
this.
well, I understand where you're going with that. If we could park
Yeah.
that until we have that
Okay.
conversation and just, I'd like to share the rest of this with you.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
also
I don't wanna get in the way.
make it clear, as I said, with both of these initiatives, what we're doing in 2024 is planning them and doing stakeholder engagement and answering all these questions. And so I don't have the answers right now on exactly what either of these initiatives ultimately are gonna look like, because that's what we're doing in 2024, is building them. So all of this is completely what we need to be doing now, is having these questions and conversations. So I think bringing in PSC and as part of our stakeholder engagement
Is
is
that coming up pretty quick?
something we should be
I
doing.
gotta look to see if it's gotten scheduled
Okay,
yet.
so let's just look at the rest of these now. So now that the Switches On platform is built as a foundation, our next components of building out this campaign are an advisory support service. So this will be an add-on when a resident searches based on their zip code and they're in Thurston County, they'll have access to the additional service that the rest of the Switches On service area won't yet. So it's kind of exciting, I think, for us, because we have an opportunity to do another pilot test with a software and service provider to do this add-on. And what it is a personalized support service that will include both a person that you can call or email or video chat with to answer the questions that you have. So this is really taking it beyond just the information provided on a website to hold people's hands and answer their questions. Because these are sometimes hard changes to make. And people aren't just gonna be like, I learned the information, now I'll buy a new heat pump. They need help along the way. So this is gonna do that hand-holding. And I'll show you the budget. We're getting a really good deal on it. It's like $7,000, or I think it's $12,000 altogether shared among the 4 jurisdictions. So we can look at that in the budget in a second. And that is, we can accelerate that piece because we have this service provider that is raring to go and wants to do Thurston County as their pilot test. And just like the Switches On platform, both of these providers are hoping to scale up to the state level because there is legislation in the state to build out this kind of service at the state level. So we'll see how that plays out. That's why we're getting a good deal on these, is because they want to test it out in Washington State and hope to make it a statewide campaign going forward.
Let me do just a quick
So-
follow-up on that. Say heat pumps, for an example. I understand there's quite a different range of efficiencies on heat pumps. So is the goal then to, rather than having a wasteful heat pump, we want to have everybody have a very efficient heat pump, right? Then maybe that won't even drain the grid.
Oh, right. I mean, heat pumps,
balance.
yeah, in general are significantly more,
And that's
four
what
times
this
more
person,
efficient than
this person might help
electric.
those individuals? Is that what's gonna happen? That's what this person will do, is
Yes.
help them make a selection,
Specific
well,
decisions.
you know, use Bob's heat pump service because he does better than Bill's.
Yeah,
Or
that's a good
something,
point.
or you will use half the electricity if you use Bob's versus Bill's. And that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, so switching from the old electric furnaces to a heat pump will lessen the burden on the grid
Sure.
to
Okay.
help counteract, you know.
And give them air conditioning at the same time, maybe.
Which has long been
Exactly.
Yeah.
the utility provider's focus, is to try to incentivize that transition so that they don't have, it's cheaper for them to incentivize, we'll say, some type of model of heat pump, not necessarily Bob's, but some.
Right,
some,
I'm not trying to
you know,
pick winners
Dicon
and
or
losers.
something else, such that they can reduce the need for the investment in the expansion of the grid.
But we're being sued every time we try to make advances in that direction by the natural gas suppliers and building industry.
Oh, they fight each one of these increases?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's a new lawsuit just got filed last week.
What?
New lawsuit just got filed.
On the state level with the building.
What level is that at?
State Building Code Council trying to stop block the new code changes that do what
Okay.
Rebecca's
Yeah,
describing.
so we're working against this tide and the influence of the natural gas.
But see, I think if we had I do think if we had that as an example, just using heat pumps, that, hey, we're gonna promote Bob's heat pump. And because it's gonna cut down the usage on the grid. You know, I think that's a big selling point.
It is.
And if people don't know that, then they get together and sue the state, it sounds like. So I think if you get the cart before the horse, you run up against these kind of problems. And that's what I'm trying to prevent. If you're trying to encourage people to get on board, you gotta have a selling point.
Yeah, that's part of the messaging, for
Okay.
sure. When we go through the benefits for, you know, air conditioning, for climate, for your own health, and the grid benefit is one of them to include as well in the messaging. So, okay, so once we have the platform, the advisory service built out, so we're spending the rest of this year designing and planning for a local incentive and outreach campaign. And this will be a local campaign for a few months where we're really galvanizing action, targeting marketing during that time, and providing some discounts on installations and services. To be determined exactly what those are, because that's what we're doing this year, is doing the stakeholder engagement to decide, do we want to build on, I mean, in any case, we can build on Energize Olympia, which has already happened. They've done a group heat pump purchase campaign. So we could just do the same thing at the county level, but through the stakeholder engagement, we're gonna learn, are there, where is the best bang for the buck? Is it just incentivizing heat pumps, or should we do heat pump water heaters, ductless heat pumps, or ducted heat pumps? Or possibly the greatest need is to do the energy audits up front to give people that information. So exactly what we're incentivizing, we will be designing and building out. And that's what we will be spending the rest of this planning phase developing. So to look at the funding for the different phases of this campaign. The Switches On campaign is already funded. We've talked about that before. What's in the interlocal agreement is for phase one, design and planning. And this is a budget of up to $14,875 for each jurisdiction, which includes both initiatives, actually, because we're rolling in the stakeholder engagement, hopefully with one consultant to do both of them together. And that's the bottom line there, and I'll show you that budget in just a second. Looking into phase two of the campaign, we are gonna look at using our allocation from the Federal Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. I need to write up that application in the next couple months, but it's a formula grant that's available to the county. The amounts for Olympia, Lacey, and the county are listed here. There was a mistake on your slide. I had 150,000 for Lacey. I'm not sure where that happened, but it's actually 115,000 for Lacey, 112,000 for Olympia, and 81,000 for Thurston County. I'm not sure exactly how they calculate those, but that's what the DOE has
that based on
determined.
population?
It's based on population, but also other factors. I haven't looked at that in a little while, but it's based on development too, I think, not just population. So the urban areas get more based on however they calculate it.
And
I can follow up with that.
what would that $112,000 go towards? I'm just using Olympia
So,
and Thurston counties there. Or maybe we get 80.
Yeah, what's that?
I don't know which one. We get 81 or do we get
These
112?
will, yeah, well, yes, we will pool these, actually, yeah, we will, allocate them to our residents, so.
Yeah, but
We're not pooling
like
them.
to
Eighty-one
offset
thousand will
buying a
go
new
to incentives.
offset,
Yes.
kinda
So there are federal incentives already,
$5,000 towards a heat pump.
but we
or-
need to, yeah, put more into that to really.
We have to
get-
take money out of the general fund to put in
No,
there?
no, no, I'm sorry. No, this is the grant. I'm saying
okay.
to really, help people overcome the financial barriers. That's what we are intending to use the,
And that's where
funding
this
here
pass
for.
down money is gonna come to us to dole out? Is that
Yes.
what's going on?
to develop these supplemental incentives to support
It
these
just doesn't
changes.
seem like if Thurston County is 81,000, that's not gonna do very much, you know? It'll do-
Well, we can look
81
at
homes.
adding from the general fund, from the climate mitigation budget, if that's something that we want to look at. What I can say is, this application is due at the end of April, so I'll be developing this and bringing it back as the next piece of this, campaign, which is again happening in 2025. So what we're looking at today is just doing the initial planning and development of the initiatives. Is that,
Yeah, you
okay,
scared me.
like,
You scared
it's
me
kind
with
of
general
one
fund,
piece at
though.
a time here.
When you talk about
Oh,
general
well.
fund, I'm the general fund man. Now
Yeah.
watch out for the
I
general fund.
said maybe, that we could have that discussion. But no, this is all a grant fund that that we are proposing to use for this currently. It does not require any match. We can limit it at this. If we were to add from another fund, we could support more households and more incentives. But this is, what we have available to us right now.
All right, we got one other initiative to go through.
Yes.
So let's
You
hold
told me I had
questions on
time.
that till the end.
Okay, yeah, all right, so, this is what the timeline looks like for the rest of the year, building out this campaign. So the second initiative is the Home Energy Score Model Ordinance, which will require, disclosure of home energy performance information at the point of sale. And again, this year, we are kicking off the development of both these initiatives, so, we're going to do the stakeholder engagement this year to develop a model ordinance and then bring it back to the board to consider adopting in 2025. So why is something like this needed? Thurston County has a lot of older homes that would benefit from energy retrofits. We have strong building codes in this state, but they don't address existing building stock. They address the new construction only. And homeowners are often not aware of the energy performance of their properties. So to remedy this, several cities have adopted home energy score ordinances to increase consumer awareness by labeling the home energy's rating at the time a property is listed for sale. And so you can think of this as like when you buy an appliance, it has the EPA Energy Star sticker on it that says, 65% efficient or whatever the number is. It'll be similar to that, easily understood to be able, but for the entire home, so homeowners and buyers and renters can compare different properties and really understand the total cost of homeownership. If you're looking to get a mortgage, you also need to know how much you expect to expend on your heating and cooling costs. So it's just providing that information so people can make informed decisions when looking to buy homes. So the overall goal, again, for 2024 is to design and propose a regionally consistent home energy score disclosure policy, which will then be, can be considered for potential adoption by each jurisdiction. And these are the specific goals here. These overlap with those of the energy efficiency campaign to a large extent. A large focus of the 2024 activities will be on stakeholder engagement. There are obviously key stakeholder groups that need to be at the table to develop this type of policy, including realtors, home energy assessors, local service providers and contractors, state energy programs, workforce development, because we need to build out the workforce to provide these home energy assessments locally. And so we have a stakeholder outreach plan, and that's where the funding here that we're proposing in this budget is going towards. Ahead of myself here, but basically in the stakeholder engagement phase, which is aiming for March through June, we're looking to do 6 focus groups with targeted groups of stakeholders. And then in the process of drafting the ordinance, bringing it to the public at the draft stage for input and incorporating the feedback
And what kind
every
of
step of the way.
ordinance? Like some kind of requirement?
Yes, it's a requirement to do a home energy score assessment of properties and list that information. What type of rating does the house get for its overall energy efficiency?
Kind of akin to now there's requirements on the disclosure form that you've actually had your septic tank service prior to it being able to be sold, or water availability certification, that type of thing.
And so this does align with state policy, House Bill 1433, and I have updated this since it was in your packet because it's progressed. It's now in its 3rd substitute version. It was passed out of committee and is in rules. And this bill standardizes the home energy labeling using the Department of Energy's federal home energy score methodology, which is what we were already looking at. So that's good. We're already in alignment with that. The statewide legislation does not require local jurisdictions to do the home energy score. It just sets the standards. So we're tracking this and just making sure that whatever we propose during this year will align with what, if this bill passes at the state level. And again, here's the timeline of building this out. We're aligning it with the campaign. These are very similar. They go together and support each other, but this one is the policy aspect. The other one is the incentive and outreach aspect of kind of an overall residential energy efficiency and electrification program.
Are you putting the stick first or the carrot first?
Doing them together.
You may want to have a, when it comes to stakeholder, I know you know this, but, TCAT hosted a whole series of
Yeah.
stakeholder meetings on this issue, and I participated in many of those. Realtors, everybody was involved in all the jurisdictions, so you may want to keep your stakeholder engagement limited to when you actually have a draft ordinance, because we weren't working from a draft ordinance.
Yeah.
Because I think anything before that would be redundant, really duplicative of what we've already done.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, that's a good reminder too. This is not
I hate to lose all
new
that
right
time and
now.
work that we
This is
spent
something that,
doing
the region has been building for several years. Thank you for reminding us of that.
And it would probably be good to have that, what's the plan, I mean, we're gonna do X, whatever X is, along with that, I think, but, because I think all those people are gonna ask questions like I'm asking. That's who I'm hearing from.
But Commissioner Mensah is pointing out that it won't be new to a lot of the stakeholders, because TCAT, Thurston Climate Action Team, has been doing some outreach about this in prior years. Okay, that's all I have. Do we have any, you said, oh, no, I do have the budget. That's what I have. So the budget, again, is for both regional initiatives rolled together. This just includes the project tasks that are expected to be completed by third-party contractors. The rest of the work will be done by staff. That's why the budget, bottom line, is not very high. The budget includes, as I said, the aspects of the campaign, the advisory support tool, 1 year of a localized web platform to support residents throughout the electrification process, that will be integrated into that Switches On website at a cost of $7,000. The advisory service, we've estimated up to maximum of 200 calls during the pilot year, seems like a good cap to put on that. If it's less, we won't have to pay this much, but if we get 200 calls over the year, that would be $12,500 split by 4. And then the stakeholder engagement for both initiatives and the communications plan and materials for the campaign, and the total comes to about 60,000 divided by 4 is less than 15,000. All right.
Many folks have taken advantage of that ordinance that we passed. I think it's been a couple of years ago
The
now.
CPACER ordinance, CPACER, Commercial
Yeah.
Property Assessed in
Yeah,
Clean Energy.
so,
We almost have our first applicant. I had a conversation on Friday. There is a project, in Thurston County, and they are just starting to look at the application. So I don't wanna say it's done until I have that application in hand, but I think we might have our first one.
and then,
tell you more
is
about
it gonna cover a lot of these issues that you've referred to today?
Well, those are, that ordinance is providing a financing mechanism for.
Yeah, but to do a lot of these things,
For a
right?
specific new development, commercial or large multifamily, industrial, agricultural development. This initiative is focused on residential, so it's a different sector.
CPACER was limited to commercial.
Yes.
There was talk of creating a residential in the legislature, but I don't think it's ever passed.
Can I ask
Yep.
a quick clarifying question? I didn't see it in the presentation, but in terms of the model ordinance, and I'm not familiar with what happens at certain cities, does that requirement fall to the homeowner or the realtor as part of the listing process? Kind of like the disclosures occur, they go through that form.
I do not know the answer to that. I have not done a deep dive since we're just at the outset of this, investigation. I will look into that.
I think so. I think it's just akin to
Kind of,
Yeah.
disclosure
something you
form.
gotta
Yeah.
attach, you gotta attach the report.
Mhm.
You gotta certify.
It's just not the county, we don't have a
No.
role in
Oh,
doing that. Okay.
No. It's just becomes part of the process for listing a home. Any other questions for the board? Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca, great job.
Okay, last item on the agenda is commissioner items, which we've got a few minutes. We also have time this afternoon for that because it's commissioner check-in. So if somebody wants to bring some up now, or we can just adjourn and anything you want to address today or this session?
Can you just remind me what is typically shared at the commissioners check-in, or like during these updates?
For commissioner
Just
items?
small, like,
Yeah, commissioner item is kind of just like any random stray
okay,
issue that you want to bring to the board, you know? Like, for
Okay.
example, I met with Crosby Carter from DNR about their new housing program, and she wanted me to share with the board about that. So I would say, hey, I had this meeting, you guys should know about this, here's where you can go, you know, or, you know, kind of what you came up with about the encampment, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, hey, I heard this is an issue, is there something we can do? Something that just doesn't, maybe it's got a time sensitivity, or you just found out about it, or, and then we just, you know,
I'll give you, you want an example?
sure.
And I mentioned this, I don't know, month ago, I can't even, but it has to do with the Yelm Cemetery. And whether or not we have any authority to deal with cemetery issues, violations of the Open Public Meetings Act, expenditure of tax funds through the cemetery district inappropriately. Those are all issues that seem to be percolating from that original complaint that I mentioned. So I just make mention of it. Elizabeth said our only role at this point, like during an opening, is that if there is only one one cemetery district commissioner, it's up to us to appoint another one, and then that's it. And then those two commissioners would find the third commissioner. So we have very limited oversight role on this, but you're probably gonna hear more about it. I heard that there's gonna be citizens coming in and they're upset about different aspects of what has been happening or not happening. So I just let the board know.
It's mainly something you've heard from the community, and
Yeah.
like some people, sometimes we get an email, it comes to all of us, but a lot of times they just reach out to a random commissioner. You wanna bring that to the board for discussion or consideration, or asking staff to follow up, and
Okay.
we're at commissioners' items on the agenda. We have a long list of Commissioner Edwards created some homework for us.
Hey,
A long list of potential adds to the agricultural zoning, some of the specific language. Staff's gonna come back with some maybe ideas, and I specifically wanted to hear your thoughts on them, because I know you've tangled with some of these activities that happen, you know, like the permitted activities and not what the limits ought to be. We talked about weddings, of course, but there's a lot of other things that happen, you know, and so be looking for that. And then we got an overview of the climate and regional initiatives.
What happens when people don't follow those rules? You know, like, I mean, there's a very well-known, bar outside of Tenino where there's all kinds of illicit activities that happen.
are outside of Tenino?
Well, I'm not gonna name the place, but, I mean, they have like full-blown concerts and like they've been shut down by the Liquor Control Board several times, but they seem to just pop right back up. And I mean, supposedly, like, there's, you know, poker nights and like they've had
We talked,
nationwide,
You know, is
like
this something
national
that-
touring bands, actually.
Did we talk about this about 2 or 3 years
Mayor
ago?
Been
Fournier
talked
and I
about many times.
had a meeting with some high-ups at
Okay.
the
I kinda-
liquor control.
I remember
about
something
what we
about
ought
this,
could
yeah.
do, and we talked to the sheriff and different things. It's really kind of falls into. And that's the kind of event that really can get the surrounding neighbors up in arms.
Oh, yeah. But it sounds like it's all illegal to start with, so that's a little different, you know?
But it's,
But
you
then
know,
who
the
comes
people
in
that
and-
follow the rules are the ones that get punished.
Sure.
And it's the people that aren't following the rules that seem to be like, well, what do we do now? They're, you know,
Does that include like a steak night or something like that?
sure I think they've done stuff like that out there.
Okay.
That
Good
band
enough.
Green Jelly played out there like 2 years ago. I mean, they were famous.
He texted me like a event poster. It looked like it was gonna be a Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
And it was an unpermitted, you know, out of the jurisdiction, right outside Tenino, and
Good.
it was like, anyway. Okay, so commissioners' items, we also have time for them this afternoon, but anything a little
I
more this
didn't bring
morning?
mine down because I thought we were gonna do it this
Yep.
afternoon.
So we're back at 2 PM for commissioner check-in.
Oh, I have one thing actually.
Just a minute.
So I'll save the Desmond update for this afternoon, but I know today at 1:30 there's a groundbreaking ceremony for the police station in Lacey. I've been seeing and hearing a lot of things about people who are upset about that. They feel like it was really short notice. I know that it's not as short notice as people are feeling right now. It's been in the works for a long time, but because that Jolt article came out recently, people are upset. So there's a planned sign waving event happening, like right across the street from the groundbreaking
Upset about what?
event. How much money is being spent on the police station and,
Oh.
yeah, training plans and stuff like that.
What was the article that you made mention to some?
It was in the Jolt about a week ago.
Just about the project, or?
Yeah, about the project.
People are just feeling like they just heard of it for the first time?
Right, yeah, and they're like, oh, you already have Forma Construction contracted, you're putting 43 million into this, and the whole project is 60-something million, and where could that money go that would be more beneficial? And so people are upset because they haven't heard about it until now.
None of those things happen quietly when you sign a $50 million contract. There's a huge public process involved in that.
Yeah, and I was aware of this like when I first started campaigning. So I know it hasn't been a secret, but now that there's a newspaper article out with all these details, a lot of people haven't heard about it. I mean, I only knew about it because I was campaigning and interacting with people in Lacey already. So I can see why the general public would feel like they were blindsided by this. But I just thought I would share that since it's happening before.
They
our next
started
check-in.
talking about it like 4 years ago when half their police station was shut down because it was like permeated with lead and from like an old shooting range. Like it's been a big deal for a while.
Yeah, I think the shock factor is the price tag. I'm pretty sure I mean, there are people who have like values that are like, oh, my values don't align with this. But that's separate from, I think, the fiscal part of it. People are really upset about how much is being spent. I mean, it's Lacey, it's not Thurston County, but I'm still hearing about it. So,
When do they find out how much we're spending on the Hill to
Polish it.
To put
polish us
lipstick on
something?
what?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that heads up. I, at one point, was gonna try to go there for that event, but it's just, for me, it's just tight.
yeah.
Too
Time
tight
is too
to even
tight, so-
get back here, really.
Probably will not be there to see the sign waving. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll see it in the paper.
Yeah.
Okay, well then we'll adjourn till 2. Thanks.